Let's now turn to the themes of sex and gender and how these operate within various social systems to uphold, maintain, or challenge social inequality. Gender stratification is the degree of inequality between males and females based on culturally defined differences between the sexes. It may be based on social status, rank, or prestige, or on access to resources, wealth, power, or influence. Gender stratification both shapes and is shaped by the social roles men and women perform, the cultural value attached to women's and men's contributions to their families and other groups, female deference to males, access to positions of power and influence, control over personal decision-making, and general beliefs and ideas about the sexes. Gender stratification is shaped by material factors, including the contribution women make to material welfare and their control or lack of control over key resources. In this photograph, which is the man, which is the woman? This story is more complicated than it might seem. Let's review the story of Max Beck, pictured here on the right, to get at the cultural complexities of sex and gender. Max was born intersexual, as are a small but significant portion of human beings. As he puts it, when I was born, the doctors couldn't tell my parents what I was. They couldn't tell if I was a boy or a girl. Between my legs, they found a rudimentary phallus and fused labioscrotal folds. They ran their tests, they poked and prodded, and they cut open my belly, removed my gonads, and sent them off to pathology. The baby was what we call intersexual. Nature made the baby neither man nor woman. Some 1 to 4% of all humans are born in some way with anomalous genes. Often, genetic testing allows doctors to determine the sex of the baby, but in Max's case, testing didn't work. The baby was genetically anomalous. Some cells were XY, some XX, so the doctors arbitrarily chose a sex and surgically made it so. His parents named the baby Judy. They winced when Judy was called a tomboy. As she entered adolescence, it was back to the hospital. Doctors insisted she was a girl, just not finished yet. Judy underwent hormone replacement therapy and a vaginoplasty. Judy was tremendously confused about her sexuality. She was attracted to women, but after she had a lesbian encounter, she discovered that she couldn't date women. While my single male partner had been relatively nonplussed about my man-made parts, my single female partner couldn't help but notice and comment on the fact that I was different. I used these ridiculously inadequate sample sizes to draw the painfully obvious, jaded, bitter conclusion. Men wouldn't care or comment on my scars. Focused only on having some place to stick it, they would barely notice any difference between me and other women they might have had sex with, since they simply wouldn't be paying that kind of attention. Women, on the other hand, would notice immediately the dreadful gulf between normal and me and run the other way. Not surprisingly, I tried to kill myself. She survived, was prescribed antidepressants, and married a man. Odd complications sent her back to the hospital, where what had been a strangely long clitoris was revealed to be a deformed penis. Upon hearing this news, her husband divorced her. She came out as a lesbian and entered into a long-term relationship with the woman on the left, Tamara. In 1998, Judy switched off estrogen and on to testosterone. Her vestigial breasts vanished. Hair returned to her face and scrotum. Judy adopted fully male gender as Max, but as a man with a surgically created vulva. Max married Tamara, a woman he first met as a lesbian activist. They've since had a baby with Tamara's egg and donated sperm. Max is not a freak. An estimated 4% of the world is born neither clearly male nor clearly female. As a portion of the global population, that's as many U.S. adults. Max's case calls into question how we categorize male and female. It also calls into question the roles we ascribe to them. Sex is cultural, not biological. Max's story suggests a complex relationship between sex, gender, and culture. First, the real world is more complex than our perception of it. We think about the world through the categories provided for us by our culture and struggle when these are challenged. Culture also provides tools for dealing with cultural contradictions. Pictured here you see a hijra, which Serena Nandak has called a third gender in India. Anthropologists define sex variably, so I give two definitions here. First, sex is the observable physical differences between male and female, especially biological differences related to human reproduction. In other words, it's biological. But we can also define sex socially as a social categorization of persons based on genitalia or chromosomes. In both cases, sex is related to biology, but here it's also a social category. Most anthropologists define gender as a cultural or social classification of persons as masculine and feminine and the sets of related roles and statuses. Gender roles are the cultural expectations of men and women in a particular society, including the division of labor. Gender hierarchies are the ways in which gendered attributes and practices are differentially valued and related to resources, prestige, and power. Anthropologist Annette Weiner argued in the 1970s that anthropologists must consider female gender roles. As she put it, whether women are publicly valued or privately secluded, whether they control politics, a range of economic commodities, or merely magic spells, they function within that society not as objects, but as individuals with some measure of control. Traditional male characteristics have been portrayed as dominant, independent, intelligent, rational, assertive, analytical, strong, brave, ambitious, active, and competitive. Of course, you might say that these are gendered ideologies or stereotypes, right? So we need to think about that. But in many societies, these qualities are attributed to divine or natural origin, but are also used to justify gender inequality. Sexuality refers to the culturally shaped ways people experience and value desire and pleasure in the context of sexual intercourse. Sexualities refer to the enactment of sexual experiences, values, and desires within cultural, social, and political contexts. How do anthropologists explore the relationship between gender and power? With cultural power on the line, How do anthropologists explore the relationship between gender and power? With cultural power on the line, gender norms have been enforced through violence. We'll look at several forms of gender violence. Broadly speaking, gender violence refers to any form of violence that is a result of the gender identities of the people involved. One form of gender violence is domestic violence. Domestic violence refers to abusive patterns of violence or threats of violence against an intimate partner or family member. Domestic violence is a prevalent, although little talked about, problem in American culture. While both women and men can be victims of domestic violence, 85% of all domestic violence victims are women. As we said before, 1 in 4 women in the United States will be a victim of domestic violence during her lifetime. These statistics clearly show a gender imbalance between victim and abuser. In other words, there's a power imbalance based on gender. Domestic violence has also been shown to be an enculturated practice. Children growing up witnessing abuse are twice as likely to become abusers. Quite simply, children learn what gender relationships are like by watching their parents. If their parents practice abuse, then that is what they will learn. There's also a significant imbalance in gender power and violence on college campuses within the United States. Young women at colleges are more frequently victims of sexual assault or rape than women in the same age bracket but not at college. They're also more frequent victims of sexual assault than all women combined. Through television and movies, many Americans tend to think of sexual assault and rape as crimes committed by strangers. But of all the sexual assaults and rapes that occur to women at college, 90% of them are by someone the victim knew, not a stranger, but a boyfriend, classmate, or colleague. The majority of these incidents occur in the person's residence, not in a dark alleyway. These are staggering statistics that speak to a massive power imbalance between women and men on college campuses. American culture, whether we like it or not, regularly supports and allows this dynamic to continue. Violence against gay men and lesbians. Those individuals who do not fit standard gender norms are also often the subject of violence. Any individual who breaks a cultural norm may be subjected to some form of sanction. Collective norms and values are what define a culture. People are constantly stepping outside of those norms and values. For centuries, homosexuality has been considered unacceptable by a majority of people in Western cultures. As a result, intersex and transgendered people often encountered strong social sanctions, often leading to violence and even death. In recent years, however, alternative gender roles have become more acceptable in Western cultures and are rapidly approaching the status of a cultural norm. But violence still lingers as a problem for transgendered individuals. Violence has also frequently been directed at gay men and lesbians. For centuries, homosexuality has been considered unacceptable by a majority of people in Western cultures. As a result, intersex and transgendered people often encounter strong social sanctions, leading to violence and even death. In recent years, however, alternative gender roles have become more acceptable in Western cultures and are rapidly approaching the status of a cultural norm. Violence still lingers as a problem for transgendered individuals. We can also point to structural gender violence. Structural violence refers to the ways unequal political, economic, and cultural structures result in the occurrence of avoidable damage to human bodies and lives, most commonly through the deprivation of basic human needs. Structural gender violence has to do with the ways gendered societal patterns of unequal access to wealth, power, and basic resources, such as food, shelter, and health care, differentially affect women in particular. While gender roles in American culture have changed greatly over the last several decades, institutional powers still exist that enforce gender norms. Many religions, for example, still do not allow female leaders. Only a small portion of government officials are female. Disparities in the amount paid for equal work between men and women still exist. Against this structural inequality, emotional and physical violence against women endures. Without changes in such institutions, sexism may endure without sexists. How is globalization transforming women's lives? Globalization, as we have seen, has had a tremendous impact on people's lives. As a result of transnational business practices, many companies have opened up factories around the globe. Many of these factories, particularly textile factories, have focused on recruiting women as employees, largely due to gender stereotypes on appropriate work for women.